everybody, welcome back to the Looney Bin. My name is Looney, and today I want to talk about Domi Reversi, Dominion Reverse Dominion, whatever you want to call it, from the recent One Piece chapter 1150. Now, we finally get a glimpse of what Imu's power looks like. At least we still don't have a perfect understanding how it works. Is it a devil fruit ability? Is it some sort of supernatural ability that only Imu has? Or is it just, I don't know, something else? We don't know the specifics. But I want to talk about Imu's abilities because there's, I think, a very interesting thing that I want to at least speculate and theorize, mostly because it's a very interesting thing that happened when Imu used their ability on both Dory, Broggy, and some of the rest of the giants. So, to begin, Imu has now full control, or somewhat a dominant control, over Gunko, right? And we see a glimpse of some of Imu's abilities, such as the book that apparently has some sort of magic spells, some dark ritual magic spells of some kind, and Gunko slash Imu are able to create or bring out certain things like the shotgun that blew off Dory's hand, right? But what we also see is, the appearance of what looks like some sort of dark angel, bad demon. Kind of looks like Satan in the form of Gunko, which I'm just going to assume is a effect of Imu's control over Gunko, and then whatever Imu's ability is, that's why Gunko was able to transform into what looks like, Devil May Cry. Or no, not Devil May Cry, but Devil Baby something. That anime that was on Netflix a couple years ago that was like really messed up. When I watched it, I was like, oh my god. But yeah, that is a very interesting ability. Some people pointed to Imu having some sort of human model Satan ability, Satan devil fruit. Similar that will essentially counteract the sun god Nika's ability in some sort of way. Now, we also see a certain ability where Imu is now able to possess or, turn other people into these demonic beings, right? A lot of us have speculated that Imu's going to use this ability on one of the Straw Hats to turn one of them, bad. I personally believe that it could be Nami. Other people think it could be someone else, could be Usopp. I think Nami could be a good choice simply because of a few things. One, it will be really interesting to see if Imu has some sort of like lore or background with Nami's character, because we still don't know some parts of her past that are still left mysterious to us, and that's why a lot of Nami fans believe that Imu might possess Nami in a similar fashion that they did to Gunko, right? So it's very well possible. Will it happen? I don't think so. But it'll be very interesting to see, especially now that we're heading into the climax, into the final arc, where a lot of the Straw Hat stories, a lot of the character arcs are probably getting like some sort of conclusion, some sort of climax, or some sort of lore, some extra lore to them, such as Brook and Gunko's lore, Frankie with the mural, as well as the Atom Tree, Robin with Saul, and I think at some point we will get something with Nami. Essentially, we do know that Oda has had something planned for Nami's backstory, because initially Strong World was supposed to be a Nami backstory lore that he was going to explore, but then went back on it because it was too emotional, and he wanted the movie to be exciting to watch. You go to the movie theater, you don't want to feel emotional, even though some movies are very emotional, right? He wanted you to go to see a One Piece movie feeling excited. That's why he changed it, as well as a interview with the film Gold Staff, where Oda didn't necessarily want them to go into more Nami's lore. He was perfectly fine to have them go and dive into like Nami and Karina's backstory, but he didn't want them to go past a certain, line, right? Because apparently he has something planned for it, so it's very exciting to see what it is. Some people theorize that Imu is going to have some sort of connection to Nami in some sort of way, like being part of the Nerona family, which I don't personally believe that's going to be the connection, but we don't know, right? So Imu's abilities can now possess other characters, right? We see that in this chapter. People are now speculating who Imu will possess. Will Luffy have to fight one of his crewmates who gets possessed by Imu, right? And we see how that possession, how that transformation occurs. So when Imu finally decides to, possess Dory, right? We see Dory's body suddenly flip. Like the ground becomes like some sort of coin and his entire body flips around. Almost as if he's going to more of a dark world version of the world that currently One Piece is in. Similar to like in Legend of Zelda, right? There was a game where there was a high roll and a low roll. Maybe it's something similar to that, right? So when Dory flips over, we see his demonic version appear and come out. He's bigger. He has immortality, right? And he looks stronger than ever. And he also has, the dark wings, the large teeth, and so on. He looks demonic. And Imu does this with the other giants as well. So we see how this ability works and how Imu's able to transform, how they are able to possess these characters, right? But I want to point out something else that I found fascinating. Because the way the possession activates, or the way Imu is able to transform these characters, that flip between the light world and the dark world is very interesting. What we do know is that members of the Will of D have their names for a very specific reason, right? Most individuals do not know what the Will of D is, right? It's one of the forbidden things that Imu makes sure that no one knows, which is why Robin is very curious about it, right? And Imu wants to erase the name of D from the history books. Imu does not want at all to have the names of the members of the D clan, supposedly, ever to be heard by normal people. And there might be a reason for it. What if that reason is because, and as we know from other flashbacks that we've seen in One Piece, is that the members of the D clan are the people who will oppose the gods, the celestial dragons. Imu, right? They're the ones who are essentially the opposition to Imu and so on. What if the reason why is because Imu cannot possess them? Imu cannot turn them into these demonic beings, right? Think of it this way. The Will of D, the members of the D clan that have the initial D in it, represent the pure light side of the moon. As we know in the Harley text, there are, those called the half moon people, right? What if it's a reference to how when there's a half moon, you have the light side and the dark side, right? Imu exists on the dark side, which is why you don't necessarily see Imu in the light, right? Imu's hiding in the castle in Marijois, so Imu likely doesn't ever go outside, which is why Imu also possesses characters like Gunko whenever Imu needs to appear in the world outside of the castle, right? Maybe the light is an issue for Imu, right? Granted, there was a light that's shown on the throne that we see in Marijois, so maybe that's not necessarily the case, but Imu doesn't necessarily ever leave the castle or leave any part of that area at all, right? So maybe that's why. Maybe Imu currently exists in that dark world, right? And he has the ability to use that dark world to, like we see with Dory, change them into demonic form and so on, right? And use the abyss to transport people. Use that power to turn others into demonic forms, transverse into this dark world, and so on. And Imu has access to that. The Will of D are the individuals who live in that light world that cannot ever go into that dark version, that of the abyss, the demonic version, because their light is so powerful that Imu cannot possess them. Imu cannot convert them into demonic forms. And that's why Imu fears them. That's why Imu doesn't want any of them to exist, because he cannot fully control them. They will be able to fully oppose Imu without Imu ever being able to do anything about it. Imu prefers control. That's why he or she has existed, right, for so long, and why they created this world government. And Imu is this hidden tyrant, this hidden king who, or queen, who controls what the world government does and why the Gorosei follow Imu, right? Granted, it could be that Imu allows them the ability to exist and gain these powers, like we saw with Saturn, right? And Imu is allowed to, take away their powers at any given moment that Imu feels like. So, what if that's why Imu opposes the will of D, right? Opposes anyone learning about the ancient history. Opposes anyone learning about what the will of D is, because they represent the half moon, the light side of the moon. The side that cannot go into darkness. And Imu has no way of ever controlling them. So if we see in the next upcoming chapters where maybe Imu tries to possess Luffy, possess Saul or something, right? But Imu is unable to, then that could explain why. That's why Imu fears them. That's why Imu sees them as an opposition to the gods, to the celestial dragons, to Imu themselves. Because he can't, she can't control them. And that's why, Imu's so fearful of them, right? And the dark side are literally Imu and the Abyss. So you have these two halves of the same coin. We see Dory have both the light side and now a demonic version of himself. Meaning that it's a battle between a light and darkness of the moon. You have the half moon people, right, of the light, and half moon people of the dark side of the moon. They will surely meet, thus creating either a full dark moon or a full moon full of light. And that's essentially what is going to be a representation of the final battle of One Piece, right? Alongside the idea of freedom. Freedom, law, control, and liberation. So I think Domi Reversi, or whatever it is called, I think is a good example of a representation of what could the final battle of One Piece be, as well as why Imu specifically fears the will of D. Because Imu cannot control them. And I think this ability is very powerful, and if we see Imu try to, let's say, do it to Luffy, then we'll know that's the case. That Imu cannot control members of, the D clan. And it will also help us in a little other thing, which is if Imu tries to possess a character but is unable to, maybe that character is a member of the D clan as well. You never know, right? What if Imu uses it on, as I mentioned before, on Nami, but it doesn't work on Nami? Will Nami be considered a member of the D clan? Who knows? But that's the thing that it also gives us. It gives us the anticipation. It gives us a reason to be hey, it didn't work on this character. Does that mean that this character is a member of the D clan? It could give us that. Especially if Imu tries it on Luffy or even tries it on Soul and does not work. I think that would be a great indication of this theory, of this speculating idea. So let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to see what happens in chapter 1150. Hopefully Luffy finally comes out of the underworld and actually gets involved in the conflict, but we'll see. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.